Aloha and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, joining you from the Breaking News Show in Honolulu, Hawaii. With me today is Tim Chrisman. I have to ask where he's joining us from, but I know he's probably in New York or Washington, or where are you?
Just outside Washington, D.C., Jurgen.
Washington, D.C. I
Yeah.
thought so because he's involved in a company, what is called, he's the executive director, better, for the Association for Space Financing Foundation for the Future. This sounds really, really exciting. And those that watch us frequently, we had a guest and talked about the possibility of space tourism just a few weeks ago, a gentleman who joined us from Switzerland. And but Tim is up to something different, and I haven't figured it out. I think he runs also, it's a marketing company. Wanted to establish hotels on Mars. I don't know. I'm just making this up. But Tim, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit more what you're doing and who you are.
Yeah, gladly. I'm born and raised in Alaska. It's a travel show, so a lot of people like hearing that I'm from Alaska because a lot of them want to travel there. I wanted to travel out, so I got my fill. I'm done. But born and raised Alaska, was in the U.S. military for a while, and about 2 years ago, a little more, started this organization called the Foundation for the Future. It's a nonprofit. And the idea is it is helping draft and advocate for policies that will advance long-term investment in space infrastructure. And so we define that as physical, spaceports, logistics integration, human, the workforce to actually build it, and then finance, the bonds and loan guarantees. And that's where the Association for Space Finance comes in. It's the industry association for space investors. So we represent their interests to Congress. But what we're ultimately trying to do is make space boring enough to be real. Space is this cool, sexy place, but nobody really believes they can go there. They're not an astronaut, they're not a rocket scientist, and so it's not even on people's list of places to go, even though this year is the first time anybody went to space for less than $1 million a piece. Virgin took a handful of people up. They didn't disclose the price, but it was less than $500,000. And so while that's out of reach for the vast majority of humans,
Including me.
That's coming down an order of magnitude over just the last 5 years. Most astronauts going into space have cost anywhere from $25 to $100 million per seat. And when private citizens try to do that, there was one that did it a while back, that went to the International Space Station. They're paying upwards of $100 million. And so the fact that just in the last 5 years, the price has come down to $500,000, with multiple companies, SpaceX included, saying they want to get it down to where the price of a ticket to space and through space is roughly the cost of a business class ticket, transcontinental. So
Wow.
$5,000-$10,000.
Well, that would be amazing. And I know about maybe a month ago or a year ago, I can't remember exactly, the Chinese were talking about working on a project where they can actually, I guess, enter space, get back on Earth, and solve the distance between Beijing and New York in just in a couple of hours or so.
Yeah.
Is this something what is for real or
Yeah, no,
no
it is.
wishful thinking?
No, there's a handful of companies that are working this um, around the world. In the US, there's at least 3 that are working on hypersonic aircraft. So these won't go all the way into space, but they will take you basically anywhere in the world in 90 to 120 minutes.
Wow, that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah. and they take off and land just like an aircraft. And yeah, it's the promise of them is truly incredible. A couple of them have test flights, I think, as early as 2025, and looking at starting service around the 2030 mark. A handful of I can't remember the airline right now, but a handful of airlines have started talking to some of these developers about leasing the aircraft. So there,
and
it's
how
like serious.
and of course the whole world right now is talking about climate change. I know when we had Professor Lippmann on our event and we
Yeah.
touched this issue, said, "Oh my God, I mean, I hope this would be the end of the world, pretty much, to offer this because it would be so hard on the environment." Is it hard on the environment?
Um, yes. In the sense that any air travel is hard. In it's a similar environmental impact to the aircraft that it's would replace. It's going to be more of an impact per passenger because these will hold fewer people, but it'll roughly be the same as a 747. So not as good as the newer ones, but not not like a rocket.
Okay. And how safe do you think it could be before, or and you said there, of course, there's a development. We're talking several years or maybe even several decades
Yeah.
away. And but how safe could this be? I mean, I'm probably way too chicken to get on a thing like this. But
Well,
I
no, and
don't
that's
know.
fair. So a lot of this is based on technology that was developed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so that was used on, intercontinental ballistic missiles or other experimental military systems back in the day. And it just military sort of got bored with it or moved on or whatever it is they do. And so these companies have adapted it to basically a different airframe than a nuclear missile. And so long story short, a lot of the bugs were worked out in the military development. Now, granted, it's a different platform. You still need to revalidate all that safety. But the core technology behind it is already vetted. So
And there goes probably the cooperation with this world we're living in right now, with all these different tensions, Russia, China, and so forth. Is there going to be a cooperation to make this work, or can one country like the United States just do it?
um, the I doubt there'll be cooperation, in part because the same technology that can be used to make these aircraft, these hypersonic engines, are what can be used to make missiles that also move just as fast and can get anywhere in the world. And so Russia, China, the US are all developing these. None of them wants the other to get it. And so it's unlikely they're going to cooperate on the civilian side of this out of concern that something could be used by one of their adversaries. I do think, in a decade or two, this is going to be ubiquitous and it's going to be, a similar level of technology that to the Pratt and Whitney engine that anybody can get it if you can pay enough, and it's just easy.
So it's like building a whole new different type of aviation industry. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look aviation 150 years ago, there was no aviation.
Right.
And and now there already is space, not travel, but there is space movement.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it could really become. I mean, hopefully, none of us can look 100 years ahead of it. But if you could look 100 years from now, do you see this? We're not going to have airports. We're going to have spaceports.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it's going to the transition will look very similar to when we added air travel in as a mode of transport. We still had sea travel, we still had rail, we still had, ground, so cars, buses, trucks, etc. But the those people who wanted to go faster and have more convenience took the aircraft. If you wanted to move large amounts of cargo, it's sort of a stair-step pyramid of how much of each of these modes of transport is used. And I think we're just going to be adding another layer to the top of that pinnacle, where those people who, for business or personal reasons, absolutely want to be somewhere really fast, will take this. There's probably not a need for the vast majority of people and the vast majority of cargo to move that fast. And any technological advances that allow this hypersonic transport is also going to reduce the cost of regular air transport. So it's not that eventually this will get to be the same price as flying in an airplane. It'll always be more expensive and be that next level up, which is something we haven't had. We've been flying the same speed in airliners since what, the 1960s?
Yeah, and what happened if you go back and talking about the same speed? We had the Concorde, and I was one of the people who actually was able to travel the Concorde one time
Mm,
from Paris to New York and then on to Washington on Air France. I never forget this. It was
yeah,
a really, really interesting experience. We took off over Paris and we
yeah.
crossed England and the Channel, and then it felt like we're taking off again. And all of a sudden, everything outside is dark blue, and it looked fantastic.
Yeah.
With good food, and we landed in New York and had breakfast all over again. So why did this stop? I know they had a terrible accident. I understand this, but accident usually never stopped aviation from progressing. So why did this stop? And why would it not stop for your initiative?
Yeah, so it seemed to stop it because it was already, so the Concorde wasn't very economical. I think Air France was permanently losing money on operating the Concorde. And there was a ton of government regulations around when they could increase to supersonic speeds. A lot of people complained about it. And so the accident was almost a convenient excuse for regulators and governments to say, look, you just need to wind this down. It's not working for anybody. And so since then, there's been quite a few technological improvements to help with the sonic boom. NASA's been doing a ton of work on this for several decades now. So that way you can fly supersonic even over populated areas, and the sound, instead of it being, like an explosion, is like a small firework. And the safety that comes with several more decades of learning on other aircraft and the improvements that have been made, 737 Max notwithstanding, um, are things that can apply to this new mode. And so between those two and the space tourism that sort of resets a price point for people, that instead of directly comparing it to air travel and saying, oh my God, it's 4 times the price of a ticket, they can say, oh, look, we're only, a fifth or a tenth the price of the true luxury flight. So all of that will help.
Right. Now, your company is involved in financing, securing financing for these type of activities. What do you guys do?
So we're the industry association for those investors.
Okay.
So essentially a union where these investors pay to be members, and we develop policies and advocate for those and regulations to help support expanding access to capital for the space sector. Um, so, and that includes hypersonic flight.
Now, it's maybe it's one of your trade secrets, but if it isn't, who would invest in this now? What type of companies? You looking at Boeing or Airbus or
So
Emirates or
yeah, the our membership ranges from family offices managing the money of high net worth individuals all the way through Barclays Investment Bank. Basically any sort of finance entity in between. And so all of those types of investors are investing, as are some of those large aerospace companies. Governments are, and then there's starting to be interest from these sovereign wealth funds. UAE, Saudi Arabia are starting to look at diversifying into investments in this sector. And so I think UAE is one that you're going to see a lot more investment come out of. They really want to be the space hub for the Middle East. And so expect them to invest heavily in that.
wow? And now, are they currently investing, or you're just talking about it right now, how to invest?
No, so they have made some investments, whether it's in other funds that are investing in space or directly in companies that are developing the tech. But there's been talk that both the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund and the UAE's version of that are looking to create basically dedicated investment vehicles for the space sector, whether it's to finance spaceport development locally or incentivize companies to relocate, or just invest in tech that can help advance the sector. Sort of an all of the above.
Yeah, and of course, you're talking about UAE and Saudi Arabia. There seems to be a competing situation
Yeah.
between the two countries. We are self going to be attending the World Travel and Tourism Council in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and our safety security team was briefly involved in a project in the Red Sea in Saudi Arabia, and and there is billions to invest, and
Yeah.
they have billions to
Yeah.
invest. So that sounds quite realistic. So if they're invested, what companies are looking for investors, or they already have investors, or what is done to develop it right now? Is it more talk, or is there already active work being done?
There's quite a bit of work being done. So far this year, about $20 billion has been invested in the space sector. And that has gone to startups that are creating new forms of new kinds of satellites, these hypersonic vehicle manufacturers like Radian Aerospace. There's cyber and sort of server startups that are trying to put server farms in space, and a number of the big launch companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin. So it sort of runs the spectrum of company types that are getting financing, and really the last 2 or 3 years have been fantastic for investment in the sector, in terms of it growing rapidly.
Yeah, and of course, when you invest into something, you want to see a return.
Right.
And this seems to be more like a long-term project. So, how likely is it that you see a return in your lifetime on this?
So most of the investors are expecting a return in the next 5 to 7 years, and we've seen so early investments in like SpaceX returned between 5 and 10 times their value in that 5 to 7 year window. There's a handful of other companies that are already generating revenue, whether from the government or commercial sector. And so it does look like some of these are going to be revenue generating companies in the near term. Now, that's more on the satellites and satellite servicing, but these like hypersonic launch vehicles, they're trying to figure out how can they get revenue from a government or cooperate on government contracts to start getting revenue to help sustain them. But even they are saying, look, we can do this pretty fast. This is not going to be the same development timeline as Boeing or Airbus. We just don't have the same bureaucracy that's going to slow this down.
Now, and your what is your business model? You take a percentage of out of the investment, or
So
you
we're a
guide people?
nonprofit. Um,
Okay,
yep.
but
So we,
non-profit means you have to live,
well,
right? You have to.
well, sure.
You're doing it for a reason.
Yeah. So we have corporate membership. So companies, whether they're finance companies or startups or just general space companies, pay to be members, and we help them both network with the investing community and connect them wherever we can to government entities that may be looking to buy the whatever good or service it is that they offer.
So you're doing you're creating networking events like trade shows or
Yeah,
similar type of events, or
yeah. So we hold like a monthly virtual conference where we bring in the leaders from companies that are in our network and outside to talk about what things they're working on, what they need, how people can get involved. We then use that and take that footage, deliver it to Congress and congressional staffs and executive agency branch people, and then we also then have participate in networking events and try to connect these companies wherever possible to who they need to be, whether it's investors because they're trying to raise money, other companies to share tech and create joint ventures, or government customers.
yeah. And you mentioned the Congress, you mentioned U.S. Government, but you also mentioned you're working with UAE and Saudi Arabia. So it's an international movement. It's not only available in the United States. So you're bringing investors together, let's say from the European Union, from Australia, or from other parts of the world to combine resources here.
Yeah, so we're focused in the US on the policy work. We
Okay.
know the laws and the policies, and so that's where we're focused on that. But we are trying to expand our network and access across the world. So we're talking with Australia, UAE, Luxembourg, Japan, to try to make sure we have the broadest network possible internationally, to both to help ensure that there's a robust investment pipeline, but also because we know that not all the good ideas live in America. And so wherever we can, we want to pull in ideas from wherever they happen to be and try to connect them with other entrepreneurs who are working similar problem sets.
Well, that's a fascinating conversation. I hope we can continue this and maybe invite you to one of our live stream Q&A events.
Yeah.
I think the travel and tourism industry is should be quite interesting in what you're doing. So, Tim, we have our half hour, but if you can stay on for just a second after this, and I'll get back to you. But for everyone else, I wanted to thank you for watching this. And if you have missed the first part, just stay tuned. As you know, we're going to repeat it every 2 hours for the next 24 hours, depending when you see this. And then, of course, you find it on our YouTube channel, on our Vimeo channel, and you find it on breakingnews.travel. And if you read any of our publications, eTurbo News, Aviation, and so forth, just click on events and on our link to YouTube, and you can watch this again, because it was an interesting discussion. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully we can stay in touch. Tim, and good luck with everything you're doing. And maybe we forgot to mention, if someone wanted to look you up, you have a website, right?
We do. It is f4fspace.org. So the letter F, the number 4, the letter F, space.org.
Yeah, and you see it on the screen right now. And so if you wanted to get in touch with Tim or see what he's doing, just go to the website. It's on the screen, and get in touch with him. If you lose his contact, feel free to click on contact on eTurbo News, and we'd be happy to connect you. Again, thank you so much, and aloha from Hawaii. And hopefully we talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jürgen.